and cons to both, right? So the pro to broader access is that people wouldn't have a challenge opening a report if they thought they might have value. The con is we just need to make sure that they should actually have access to the information within that report based on the scope of their role. I don't know how access is currently provisioned in terms of being able to get to certain InfoView reports, so that's just a gap of knowledge on my part that probably most people on this call have the answer to. But I see user-based, yeah. I know, but user-based, but how are the users grouped? It's like role and scope. Okay. So yeah, so individual approval by manager, that's where theoretically, if we could, and this is true, I think, across many, many orgs, not just ours. Yeah, you should show me InfoView.
I'm going to pause there for anybody who's on the phone. Brooke is chat box poking at Brett with a lot of smiley faces. Anyways, go ahead, Brett.
And yeah, that's so I'm responding to her yes, her texts. So as it relates to sort of the access thing, I think in a perfect world, or even a more less imperfect world, we would have sort of role-based access, and it would be managed in a way where we could, in an agile fashion, get people added to certain roles, and then they would have access to all of that information that relates to those roles. I found that that's theoretically part of that identity and access management that's being rolled out by IT security across our organization would enable that. However, I bet that's not top on their list of things to accomplish. That being said, I do know that there's some active efforts underway within our team on the governance side. Kim has shared a few communications with me, Kim Jackson, around evaluating how we could potentially do broader access to reports, which, again, could potentially solve some of these issues, but maybe not all of them as it relates to access. The other, solution to that is better metadata, right? So having more clarity of what's actually contained within a report, either what the fields are or what the provenance is, what the purpose of it is. And I know that's something we're actively working on to improve the usability of MyHighway. And that's something that's going to be some key action items for Kim's team to, as they build out their data governance program more widely across the org. And to help with that, I think if there is theoretically a way to prioritize some of the reports that people think are most important, or themes of reports that are most important, we'd want to create that feedback loop to Kim's team, so we could make sure we're adding, that we're prioritizing adding the right information to the right reports as quickly as possible. So I know not a grandiose solution, but I think a couple different ways we could potentially deal with the access to reports problem, which I saw as a theme. Another theme I saw was around delays in response time. So a request was put into HI, maybe because something either wasn't working or needed to be scheduled, and that there were sometimes delays of 8 months. At least one example, I think, had an 8-month delay to get feedback, and by that time the report was kind of like no longer needed, or they'd moved on and come up with some other solution. So I think there's certainly something, and I've heard that we have a queue of over 600 or something outstanding requests. So I think one thing that I can talk to is I'd certainly like to figure out a way for us as an HI team to not have that kind of backlog. And a way to do that is to look at, what are the type of requests that are out there, and are there things that could theoretically be or should be done by local and regional resources, and if that's the case, what's preventing you? Have we not given you the right level of access or the right types of work to be able to accomplish those goals? Because if you are relying on us to solve local needs for operational reporting, then we've got an opportunity to improve how we have things structured and functioned, and that's probably true. So I just want to acknowledge that as something I think we definitely really need to actively look into.
Hey, Brett. This is Karin. So on that note, have you looked at that queue and stratified that out to see what percentage of the 600 whatever reports that are in the queue really wouldn't be in that category?
I know that Brooke underwent an effort right before I arrived on the scene with PSJH, but I have not had an opportunity to dig in. So I don't know, Brooke, if you've got any feedback on that.
Any feedback on the queue itself?
Yeah, and any stratification of the queue to see like what could be solved from like local operational reporting, or what percentage of that might be that.
Yeah. So I don't have the current number in terms of percentages of them. We do have, like Brett mentioned, we have about 650 that has in the queue. That's grown from about 450 given all of the resources we shifted to Callisto. I would say that if in the queue there is a high level of input. We have it more stratified by the regions that are coming through. So we have the highest regions we get requests from are Oregon and Swedish, as you can imagine, that being the largest, and as well as California. We get quite a bit from California. And then other smaller regions have smaller requests. Typically, we try to look at, as requests come in, we do look at all of the other tools that we have, and we try to meet the need with those other tools. We try to leverage super users in the regions to do some of that work if they have access to Webby and other areas that we've got. So it doesn't really answer your question, Karen. I think there's more work to be done there. One of the other things we've been looking at is how do we use that insight, use the information that's coming in to expand our self-service options. So a good example is Revenue Cycle, and Revenue Cycle has all but 100% shifted to HANA. And so any new requests we get into Revenue Cycle goes into our development and enhancement queue for HANA. So not a real, I don't have numbers for you, we could get that, but that is our approach at looking at that. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, it does. It does. Oh, so I'm going to read, hold on through there. Louise just stated, and there are also challenges of creating local reporting for local specifics, but more and more there are requests to the regional owner to scale that report beyond the local ministry.
Yeah. So that is a common thing that we have and that we've been talking a lot about internally. How do we address that? So she's correct. A lot of the requests we get in will be for, reports, tweak this report, tweak that report. Or sometimes, I know Louise and I were talking yesterday, sometimes if you've developed a report in Northwest or Swedish has, people will find that on my highway and then they'll ask it for the other regions. I know that Jessica Pham in California has been creating a care management dashboard, and she's been working with different regions to adapt that to their needs. So how do we get around that, right? Because there are endless variations to these things. And one of the things we're talking about internally is how do we adopt a more metric strategy report, metric library kind of approach, where we can make the metrics that make up any individual dashboard available that you can kind of plug and play. So if you've ever looked at the metrics inventory feature on Vantage, it is clunky, I'll grant you that. But what it does allow you to do is pick and choose which metrics you want to see. So taking that kind of functionality and perhaps putting it into Webby or HANA and making just a vast metrics library available. So if you don't want to see everybody's metrics, you only want to see a few of them, then you can pull them into your own report in a more self-service fashion. So that's one of the things we're pursuing to try to get at that need.
Great. Thank you. Hold on. I am looking at the chat box here just to make sure that we've got everything. Susan Boardman weighed in and said it would be helpful to be able to share upon request the SQL or for existing reports for the requester to be able to understand the logic criteria. This looks like the first number 6. So Susan, yeah, I think yours is if we get to a little bit more about the better metadata, I think that will get to hopefully some of that, not all of it probably, but I know we're going to hit that note probably soon, right, Brett? About sharing code. Is that one of your themes? Or is that a tactic within it?
It's just not the metadata. It's really, can I look at the code and understand where, I'm pretty good when I make a request on my reports, this and that, but it's really much more collaborative to be able to see the code and be able to directly go like, oh, whoa, this isn't right, or be able to say, oh, I understand what I'm getting now. This is just information. It's been very unclear to me, and I chased it up the chain a little bit when that policy first came out, but it seems very strange to me that information can't be shared. I'm just going to say that. Thank you.
I know you are not the only one in any way, Susan, that feels this, and that was actually really, that exactly was what sparked a lot of the conversations. Brooke, Hannah, Brett, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, let me speak to that one. This is still Brooke, but let me speak to that one a little bit. Interestingly, I've been researching that issue with other organizations, and I was talking to somebody from an organization back east that's a multi-state organization, and I was asking about this. I said, this is a common question we're getting, that people are very frustrated with this policy that we have. And their approach, and what I've seen in a couple organizations lately in healthcare, is they have taken a harder line than we have, if you can believe that, and have just said, no, we're not sharing because of the time-consuming process of that endless reconciliation that we talk about. I think that what Brett and Hannah will say, and they can speak for themselves, is that we do hear the concerns. We are re-looking at it. And so I hopefully will have come to a compromise with the organization around the policy. But it is not an uncommon or, it's not a vindictive policy. It's not a horrible policy. It addresses concerns, and hopefully we can address those concerns together and come up with something that works for all.
Yeah, I would say that's well said, Brooke. I can tell you that at my previous org, where I started I built a clinical analytics role and function, is that we were not allowed to have SQL access to our enterprise data warehouse, even though we very clearly had the skill set to be able to do it. Now, there were some nuances. Now, we were ultimately able to write direct queries against a copy of our Cerner prod, so we were at standby. So we were actually still able to accomplish a lot of things we needed to do. So it's not a perfect purview, but I think that we definitely, what I will say is we are looking into what our current policies are, and we are actively evaluating them, and we will still, and Michael, I know you're waiting, but we're still intending to get some direct feedback from some of you folks and actually have a dialogue with you, and try to get to a place that makes the most sense. The only thing we're really trying to avoid is for people to end up, well, there's two things, right? So there's a whole bunch of back and forth if someone's trying to interpret something and then asking a bunch of questions, and then folks aren't able to get the work done that they need to get done because they're just spending all their time answering people who are trying to interpret SQL and who may or may not have the skill set to do so, right? So that's a risk, right? But not necessarily one that we shouldn't approach, but something to consider. And then there's folks who could potentially, try to build something off of it, but not really totally understand it, and then end up answering the wrong question or answering the right question with the wrong information. Now, again, that in and of itself isn't a reason not to do it, but it is a risk that we have to acknowledge. So I think where I'd like for us to get is where we're balancing, what we're trying to do is maximize business value, not minimize risk. And I would say that our current policy is the attempt to minimize risk. And we need to come up with something that's more balanced, but we need to do it in a way where we're still acknowledging the risk and trying to mitigate it where possible.
Yeah, those were the two things that were brought up when I chased it up the ladder a little bit when it came into being. And I understand that, acknowledge that. I do believe there is a compromise place, though.
I'm with you.
That if it's we give it, if you can go off and read it, and I sign something, I will not ask you any questions.
Right.
I'm happy to do that. And, and for me, because of the way things are set up, I'm not really putting things in production, but I'm still, I may be writing queries just to get stuff done because there's such a backlog.
No, exactly.
But, you end up doing it. So thank you for addressing it, and thank you for your words. It sounds like there may be a way, like you said, to maximize our business efficiency and minimize the risk, but not at the expense of business efficiency. Thank you.
Right. No, I think we need to. We can't take an absolute approach, right? That never works. We need to, we need to come up with an approach that's going to maximize your ability to do the work that you've been hired to do, while still ensuring that we are effectively managing and stewarding the organization's data assets, right? Um, so,
Yeah.
agree with you.
Yeah. Louise, did you want to weigh in? I know you felt a lot like Susan did. And Brett, I love the phrase of the maximizing value versus minimizing risk, because I think that's been maybe a very well articulated way of describing the frustration that folks from the front lines have had about that, in that they're trying to provide value, and it's not all about the minimizing risk, and we're all tend to be really responsible adults. So if there's some way that we could really tackle this, I know that's a big one. Louise, did you have anything to add on this one? I know this has been near and dear to your heart as well.
Well, it has. I think my perspective kind of on our conversation at this point is that, it's almost a chicken and an egg discussion. I feel like that perhaps because of the 650 request queue, or maybe not, on the local regional level, there is just more and more requests. Those get met, and, people go, oh, this looks good. We need to make this scaled. So then that gets more requests in. And so I guess my perspective at this point, is a little higher than just, can we have access to the code or whatever? But really, how can we get this chicken and egg to stop? Be able to have, what is created on a local level, perhaps it is excellent work. What is an avenue to be able to scale that? And what that's created on a HI platform that is available and scaled, but may need to be tweaked for local purposes. How can we do that? I just feel like that it's not an either or, but kind of how really can we work together to be able to keep from kind of chasing our tails and pointing fingers at each other.
Yeah, totally. Well, the first thing is I can tell you all that it's my sincere intention to eliminate finger pointing. All right, like that's, and I hope that we all can work together so that you don't feel like you have to point fingers at us as being a barrier to success. I do think that that we all have to be accountable for our actions, and we do also, to your point, as we have local and regional resources creating solutions. What's the most efficient mechanism for for putting those under review and making them available on a broader basis if it's something that actually has broader demand, right? So if you're building something that really is an enterprise-wide solution, even if you're building it locally, I mean, the first thing is I'd say ideally you don't have to do that because we should be doing it. Clearly, that's your chicken and egg scenario, right? Where we, if we're so bogged down in other things, we're not getting to the system priorities. And I think the other side is that we need to, and Brooke was alluding to this earlier, is we need to make sure that if we have system-wide metrics, that we have them available in a way where you can access them and leverage them based on your local needs. So completely appreciate where you're coming from and agree with your sentiments.
I'm going to pause this for a second to catch up on some of the chats that's in the chat box, and then we can continue forward, if that's okay. There was just one other thing that seemed to be in relation, Brooke, to where you were talking about sort of metadata and data libraries. So from Richard saying having a data librarian to manage requests and match them to standardized reports would help. That person would also have as a main function the job of cataloging reports and assuring all data has a dictionary and mapping to the reports. Then in standardized change management, if the data warehouse changes, that person can alert users on what reports are affected and could utilize a standardized library and medical taxonomy to enable easable report searching. So are there thoughts around a potential role such as that? Richard, do you guys have that in at Swedish?
Under Dr. Mint, it was created, but it was never filled, and then the position was reassigned elsewhere.
Well, this is Brett again. What I would say is that conceptually, I think I totally agree with you, and I think that's really some of the functions that'll fall under Kim's pillar are really intended to address those very things. So when you talk about reference data management, that's essentially what you're talking about, right? Is where do we have standard libraries of reference information, and how do we ensure that and this also goes to writing code, right? Where we update something in one place and it basically everything refers to that singular place, single source of truth, and therefore you don't have to update 1,000 reports. You just update it in where the reference data needs to be updated, and all the reports are corrected. So that is a function of what she's looking to do under her data governance program, and master data obviously around the larger domains of information like provider, patient, consumer, location, those sort of other key areas. So absolutely, I don't think she has a title of medical librarian, but that type of function is definitely on her radar. And I do think there's value. I think the challenge is that there's such a high volume that until you get the reference data right and you start referring to that and using it consistently, then that librarian is, has more work to do than they could possibly keep up with, as with every unique report and without good metadata standards. But
if I may, when I hear you say it that way, what I hear is that it's too much work for one person to keep up with regardless. So I would ask how Jessica could even manage it, even through a group. And it sounds like what we need is a commitment to hiring several people or having a group to do this as a regular job.
Which we do have under Kim Jackson's pillar, sorry. We do. And what we may want to do is see how we can get support from others. So if Jessica's doing something as well, if there's a way we can sync all of those functions together so that, the sum is greater than, the whole of its parts, I think that's definitely the way we would want to go. We certainly don't want people doing rework or cross purposes.
Yep, exactly. Yep, Jessica weighed in saying data governance with a metadata repository data lineage. So yes. Sorry, someone was going to weigh in.
Last point, if I could, it didn't go through. It gave me a message that the text didn't get sent. A professional medical librarian, which large corporations and others hire, I would put forth the notion that they're actually a lot more efficient with it because they're not only trained in it, but they're experienced in it ideally. And they have the tools to do this as a regular thing. The rest of us have other roles and other jobs, and I think we just see this as overwhelming. But for a professional medical librarian who might use tools like MESH and other taxonomies, it's a lot easier.
And Richard, I think your text did come through. Was this the NLM, the website that you sent over here, the link? It went through on text, so we've got it.
Correct, on the
yep.
NLM.
Good, thank you. Okay, I think we are caught up in all of the things. Okay, continue on, Brett.
I think Michael had something to say.
Oh, sorry, let me go back.
Oh,
did I miss you, Michael? I apologize.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, I was just going to add that I think, Brett, the point that you're making is that we need kind of systems and processes and technological solutions to basically to accomplish the intent that I think Richard is describing. So if we disseminate those processes and we use the technology that avails ourselves of the processes, and everyone within HI and everyone beyond HI does that, then I think we accomplish that intent of having a data librarian or an army of them. I would agree that there's no one person or no group of people who could actually have the cognitive ability to do that. But if we bake it into our processes, then it becomes, I think, easier technologically. We would just have to disseminate that, not within just HI, but broadly to all analysts in the organizations, and set the expectation that they're following those processes.
Yep. No, I'm with you, Michael. Yeah, I agree.
So this is Hannah. I don't want to derail the conversation, but I would just say to kind of go back to Louise's comment as far as the chicken versus the egg and the 600 and change tickets that we have in the system. Is it because that people don't have access, or they don't know where to get the information that they're submitting tickets, or vice versa? is that I keep going back to the notion, and if people can follow me, it really isn't random, is the Human Genome Project. Right. Initially, it was difficult to get traction because you just had a select number of people in Bethesda who was trying to map the human genome until that it became more worldwide and people were sharing the information. So I would say that there is an opportunity for HI to work with the regions, to work with a larger group, to have the regions be an extension of HI, personal perspective here. I don't speak on behalf of anyone, but I would say that there is an opportunity to be collaborative, using sort of the analogy of the Human Genome Project, so that we can increase each other's bandwidth and get more work done. And so then looping back to what Louise was saying in terms of, is it the chicken or the egg, right? So are the regions making requests because if they don't have what they need, or vice versa?
So that Hannah, I'd be interested in what people think about that. And you and I have talked about this before. There are groups, like I always go back to Tamar and a demo I saw of them at HIMSS, where you can actually do some crowdsourcing of data governance or some of the metadata collection that occurs. And I think something like that could support what you're talking about.
I think that it's a possibility to discuss perhaps internally, and like I said, I don't want to derail the conversation. I don't want to blindside Brett or you, but you and I have talked about crowdsourcing before, but I just, I wanted to acknowledge Louise's comment. I wanted to come back to it and just say that it is valuable, the work that the regions are doing and the system is doing, and that I think that there is a necessary happy medium to be had.
I think for anybody who's listened to Rod Hochman on down around removing friction, right? It's time, and Amy, we've all got to remove the friction that's in this system, whether, doesn't matter within your silo or within the system, and part of that is identifying where the friction is and then trying to figure out how to get that out. So eyes wide open from everybody saying, where are the pain points collectively, and let's eliminate those so we can best move the dial forward.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, Mike weighed in, and Rebecca, I'll get to you in just a second. Mike weighed in saying, totally agree that we could crowdsource data governance. We just need the platform and the processes to do so. Anything else on crowdsourcing, sort of the data governance model? And probably more to come on that one. And then, yep, Louise agreed with Michael. Yep. And then Rebecca said in some companies that she's worked for, they've had business analysts create technical workflow documentation for the projects they were on. So I think that sort of gets to what you were saying before, Brett. It's that lack of understanding of how were things decided, where do things come from, where is that documented somewhere, so it's not such a trying to go down rabbit holes, either reinventing the wheel or figuring out how it was done in the first place.
So a follow-up question on that one, Karen. Are you all looking for us to tell you how to do all of that? Because do you all have best practices where you're, some of these things that you're looking for from HI, where you've implemented those things in your teams?
This is Louise, and I think that really speaks to Michael's comment. I think that there is so much that is being done on a local or regional level in order to get it done. It may not be the most efficient way of doing it. It may not be the sterling way of doing it, but it gets it done, and it gets that surgeon that needs the data for tomorrow, that data. At the same time, I just feel like that all of the regions could really benefit, all the local regions could benefit from, as he said, the platforms and the processes that are created, on a higher level, or that are known to be good, and then implement them, locally and regionally as well. I feel like it would increase our efficiency to some degree, and obviously sometimes it might have to be adapted to the particular area. But I don't know what I hear you say, it could very well be supported by what Micheal said. If we could, kind of share platforms and processes that could be incorporated on a local level as well as on an HI level.
Yeah, Brooke, this is Micheal. I think that what we've tried to do at Swedish to some extent is to use TFS to start to build out a data dictionary, but it's an okay step, but it's really not a great step. Like it doesn't create the sort of cascading data governance that I think folks would want. And honestly, at Swedish, I don't think we're ever going to be sophisticated enough to figure it out in the right way. But I think that's okay, because I think it's more in HI's wheelhouse or area of expertise to say, this is how data governance should work. Here's a platform that, all analysts within the system should use for data governance, or here's the, the architecture to achieve that. Like that's not something we could really accomplish, even though we've sort of tried to do it on our own, but we'd be very happy to help structure what that might look like, and certainly to contribute to it.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think that's so conceptually for data governance to work properly, right? It can't just be, it's a discipline, and so there's a department with expertise who provides processes and tools, but then it's a discipline that ultimately is enacted by the people of the organization, right? And so we may have some folks who are sort of overseeing the process, but you all still need to be actually participating for us to be able to scale and meet the organizational needs. We can't do it all from one centralized body. Or at least we'll never keep up if we try.
So Robert weighed in and said, I believe there'd be willing groups at many ministries for this kind of effort. I'm not sure if that was the crowdsourcing or this sort of idea of this collective design of data governance. The second one was, could look at the project management model for a good data governance crowdsource model. Yeah, okay, this is together. The PM Central Group supports standardizing policies and processes for project management, while the group closer to the actual work being done is responsible for doing the management of the projects. Kind of fits what's being described.
Yeah, I think the one thing I do want to add is I don't want to get too far out in front, since Kim is really the one responsible for enacting our data governance strategy. So I don't want to. I know she has her vision for how we're going to do this, and I think we'll make sure that she's maybe is able to get in front of this group and have a conversation and get this same type of feedback. We'll obviously share this with her as well, but I think it'll help shape her strategy as she's looking to execute.
Perfect. And that could be one of our future on our regional meetings, is invite Kim to discuss that. That would probably be one of the best ones for us.
Definitely.
Great.
Sorry, forgive me. Who is Kim?
Kim Jackson is our VP of Strategy, Products, and Governance, but essentially an easier way to, because her title is long-winded, is she's in charge of our data governance efforts, as well as our reference and master data. So really all things sort of the how do we define data, and how do we define our metrics, some of our metric strategy, and how do we make sure that that's shared in a way that's useful, the right processes, the right discipline, the right tools and technologies. So that's some of her key area of responsibility, and she's on our HI team.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Brett.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Louise, and I would just say that I feel like this crowdsourcing can go far beyond data management, data
governance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I feel like it can go to just lots of processes that have been developed centrally that would be good to enact on a local level. And I think of even like how different groups get the requests, how do they work the requests, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like the crowdsourcing could go beyond just that of data governance.
I agree. Actually, it's sort of, Mike, it makes me think about what you and I were emailing about last night of some of the things that you guys have done and just that sharing of it. How do you do it? What's the best practice? And how do we scale that up rapidly and leverage the strengths of the different regions through a crowdsourcing way? Yeah. Okay, we are at 12 minutes till the end. Other comments on this one before? Brett, other themes that you saw?
Sorry, those were the two. We at least acknowledged that one or two other ones with Susan talked about the SQL piece. So that was another one.
All right, I'm going to open it up to the group for any thoughts, any other questions, any areas that maybe weren't identified in the particular cases that we sent over, but that you've experienced. Now's your shot.
Yes, we are not taking any feedback after.
The clock stops in 11 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. We self-destruct.
So this is John from the Data Consultants, and let me just say I'm really excited for this conversation. I started with HI as a data consultant about a few weeks ago, and I've noticed a lot of overlapping of projects, both regionally, system, and even different regions working on the same thing. And I'm, with all the talent that we have here, looking at these names and the majority of you I've worked with, I'm very excited about the collaboration. So, I just wanted to say that out loud and get it out there, because I think we could do so much for our patients as we kind of unite and look for a way to leverage our resources more efficiently.
Thanks, John. I think I've heard that a lot from a lot of the folks, both here on this call and then who weren't able to make it, saying everybody knows, for those of you who know me, I'm a very transparent person, and yet I hate inefficiency and just watching. I know we all are in the same way of want to do the right thing and provide value. So how do we do it together? So it's an exciting time to pull this together. So next steps for this particular component. So Brett, Hannah, and Brooke, this group meets together regionally, and we sort of share best practices. If okay by you, obviously I think the next steps for me for sure is to try to get Kim on the docket for our next quarterly meeting, if not before then, to really start talking about data governance. But obviously keeping the door open for feedback and any updates. I know there's lots of ways that you all can provide updates as to what you're doing to many of the folks on this call, but we will keep in contact with you around any follow-ups, et cetera, that need to happen, bringing back to this particular group, or if there's things that you want to run by this group, either via a phone call or even the listserv, the distribution. You've got folks from every single state. So this is a good group to get some real-time, quick end-user feedback.
Yeah, that's great. And thanks again, Karin, for setting this up and giving us the opportunity to have a dialogue with all of these folks. I think it's really helpful for us to get the feedback. It'll help us better shape our approach, make sure that we're doing things thoughtfully and not in a vacuum or in a perceived ivory tower at the system level. That's definitely not my MO nor my intention.
Great. Well, thank you to the three of you for giving us the time. We appreciate it. Mike from Swedish, we've got 8 minutes. Would you want to just briefly share what you shot over to me? Do you want to share, take over the screen?
Yeah, I can do that. Let me pull up.
And Brett, Brooke, and Hannah, you're welcome to stay on the call. This is something that in the spirit of sharing best practices and scaling up or helping folks get to value faster, Mike had sent over something that his team's done that he's particularly proud of, and I thought it would be a great example for the rest of the group.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, can people see my screen?
Yes.
So, major caveat here, because we built this out in WellSpot, and lo and behold, at this countdown, WellSpot's going away.
Oh, Mike.
Obviously, we're a little bummed about the work that's going to go into migrating this effort, but we think it's still extremely important, regardless of kind of where it resides. Eddie Swafford had this kind of funny analogy today, like, your commute is your commute, you're just switching cars. I was like, okay, whatever. But so, WellSpot's going to go away. We build this thing in WellSpot, but we'll migrate it over to a future platform. What our goal was is we wanted to kind of demystify stuff having to do with data, because we know there's a lot of confusion and frustration about data. Where do I go to find it? Who do I ask about it? What do all these different tools mean? And so this is an effort that went on within the Swedish Healthcare Analytics Group, really largely driven, not by me, but other folks on this call. So Nikki Iglesias, Brian Sales, Miranda Purdue, several other analysts within our team who really came together to put some information together in a pretty comprehensive way to help people kind of understand more about data at Swedish. And so it's divided into these different sections, and this is meant to be a caregiver-facing sort of resource that we could just share with folks across the organization, a little bit less technically minded. And so the first section just goes through where to find data. So a few resources that we want to direct people toward when they're looking for data. We built a Tableau landing page where we collate a lot of reports that are relevant to Swedish, either built within Swedish or within other, CPG groups or whatever, collated there, so we direct people to check that out. We've got a link to My Highway so people know that they can actually do a broader search there. We list some of the data tools that are available, and if folks can't find what they're looking for, we direct them to submit a request, and this is what that request process looks like. So that's kind of the first page here under where to find data at Swedish. And as we go through here, there's more information about the various tools that people can use. So either to collect data and track data, so tools like RedCap or iSurvey, and other tools for finding and pulling data. So the landing page, like I mentioned, in My Highway, Vantage, Tableau generically, Crimson, which we use at Swedish, Callisto, which is upcoming, Insights, LogicStream. So as you can tell, or as you all know very well, there are many tools that are available to folks, but they don't know kind of which ones to use for what purpose. And so we've given some descriptions here of which tools do what, how to get access, what it's good for, maybe what it's not, that sort of thing. So that's about tools specifically. We go into which teams produce data for Swedish, so the Healthcare Analytics team, Healthcare Intelligence, who does what and why, a little bit about governance in terms of the Swedish Metrics Council that governs data stuff at Swedish. There's some information here. We get this question a lot. How does data get into a report? So we talk a little bit about kind of data flows and how it gets into, Clarity or EDW, that sort of thing, because believe it or not, people who are non-technical actually do ask that question and want to know. We talk a little bit about where our data go externally, so external registries, rating agencies, and payers, because those are a lot of the recipients of our data. And so moving on, then there's some various tutorials and job aids. And this is a little bit under construction, I would say, and then some other spaces for if folks need more help. So I would say this was an effort, kind of caregiver-facing, to help to collate stuff about data to try to demystify data at Swedish. There's probably analog lessons to be learned for other groups across the system. And I would just say the other thing that we're shifting our focus toward currently is a separate guide specifically for analysts to collate best practices, resources, guides, that sort of thing for more technical folks. And so that's what we're working on now, and I'd be happy to bring that back and share it with the group once that is more fully drafted and ready to share with folks. But this is the piece that we're sharing with caregivers, where we're saying, hey, if you don't know where to start when it comes to data, like, go here, like, look here first. And so we think it's helpful for folks. Questions about that?
Can I ask you, Micheal, is this, how are people receiving this, and are they using it a lot?
Yeah, great question. So we've had various types of communication go out. So we communicate via our quality newsletter and other just in-person forums and committees. So we've been socializing it that way. And we've gotten, the anecdotal feedback from those forums that this is very helpful and that people will kind of socialize this among their teams. Usage statistics we probably could pull from WellSpot, but I don't know if we've done that. And I don't know if Nikki is on the line still or could speak to whether or not we've actually pulled those, or I'm sure we could in the future.
Yeah, we've taken a look at it. If you go to, there's a reports button towards the top above the icons.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, we launched this sometime, I think, in mid-May, so it's still a fairly new tool. I think it's been helpful for our analytics team, kind of like what Micheal mentioned. We prioritized content that we usually get questions about, so we'll either start directing people to the page or, just sometimes to make it easier for the customers, we can just at least copy and paste it, but the responses are there. It's still in fairly initial phases, but we've definitely heard from a lot of people that it is just helpful to know that there's transparency around the process, and we're hoping that any resource, whether it lives in WellSpot or SharePoint, just reflects the evolving processes and resources that we have available to the organization.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I think that's great. I was asking about it because the informatics group, John Spittle, one of our other data consultants, and I were speaking to that group a couple weeks ago in Alaska, and they were asking conceptually for some of the same things. So I think it's a really good tool to socialize, particularly with that group, because they do a lot of that at the elbow work with caregivers. So I think I appreciate seeing it. Thank you.
And what I loved about this was it sort of pulls all the pieces together. And as we've seen, as people get more mature with data, here's how they all link. Here's where you can go. It's sort of a good 101 for anyone. Yeah. So we are at the hour. Any other questions? Mike, excellent job. Mike and team, really, really well done. I loved it when he sent it over, and I thought it'd just be a great thing to share. And if folks are interested, email Mike. Where are you at? Meldal is on here. He is in the invite list, and his name is there. He is at Swedish, and if you are interested in learning more about it or having him show somebody in your region or ministry, let he or his team know. Great. All right. Any other questions for Mike or group? All right, thanks everybody. It is 3:01. Have a great rest of the week. And thanks, Mike. He put it in the chat box. Thank you so much. Awesome. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.